Picture this, a story so incredible it turns darkness into light and vengeance into mercy. Can you believe it actually happened? Stay tuned, because today we're unraveling a true tale from early 20th century Italy that'll leave you in awe. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Before we dive in, let's set the scene. Imagine rolling hills under a golden Italian sun, a tiny town perched above endless fields. That's Corinaldo, where our story begins. In this video, we're exploring the life of Maria Goretti, a girl whose journey is both heartbreaking and uplifting. She was born on October 16, 1890, right in that picturesque town, the third child of Luigi Goretti and Assunta Carini. These two were a hard-working pair, bound by a rock-solid Catholic faith that carried them through life's toughest moments. Just 24 hours after Maria arrived, they baptized her at the Church of St. Francis, the same place where they'd gotten married 4 years earlier. It's a little detail that feels almost poetic, doesn't it? Now, as we zoom into Corinaldo, think of quaint stone houses and vineyards stretching out below. Life wasn't as idyllic as it looked. Poverty clung to the Gorettis like a shadow, a common struggle for Italian families back then. The beauty around them couldn't fill empty stomachs, and soon Luigi faced a brutal decision: leave behind the hometown his family had called theirs for generations. This was where he'd met Assunta, where they'd worked together under the sun picking grapes. Hoping for a fresh start, they moved to Pano, a small town 40 miles south of Rome. What they didn't know was that this choice would spark a story that'd ripple through time. After saying goodbye to Corinaldo, the Gorettis set their sights on Pano, a small town about 40 miles south of Rome. It wasn't a decision they made lightly. Leaving behind a hometown is never easy, especially one as steeped in history and heart as Corinaldo was for them. This was where Luigi and Assunta had met, where they'd worked side by side in the vineyards, picking grapes under the warm Italian sun, their love growing with every harvest. But poverty doesn't care about sentimentality. It gnaws at you, forces your hand. And for the Gorettis, staying in Corinaldo just wasn't sustainable anymore. So, they packed up their modest belongings, said farewell to the rolling hills, and headed toward what they hoped would be a lifeline. In Pano, they stepped into the world of sharecropping, a harsh reality for countless families scraping by in early 20th century Italy. Here's how it worked. They didn't own the land they farmed. Instead, they labored on someone else's property, pouring their sweat and strength into the soil. At harvest time, they'd split the crops 50-50 with the landowner. It sounds simple, but trust me, it was anything but. Picture long, grueling days under a relentless sun, backs aching, hands blistered from wielding tools, all to grow food they could only keep half of. For Luigi, Assunta, and their kids, including little Maria, this was survival, plain and simple. It wasn't glamorous, and it sure wasn't fair, but it kept them going. Still, amid the hardship, they clung to what kept them whole: their family bond and their unshakable Catholic faith. They'd gather after those exhausting days, sharing what little they had, praying together, finding comfort in routine. Pano wasn't the promised land they might have dreamed of, but it was a new chapter, one they tackled with resilience and quiet determination, unaware that tougher trials were lurking just around the corner. Settling into Pano, the Gorettis began to carve out a routine But it didn't take long for new dynamics to stir things up. Luigi found himself working alongside Giovanni Serenelli, a fellow laborer with a reputation that preceded him, and not in a good way. Giovanni was the kind of man you'd steer clear of if you could. A heavy drinker with a short fuse, prone to outbursts that left people on edge. He lived just close enough with his teenage son, Alessandro, and the two families struck a deal to share the workload and split the harvest. For Luigi, it was a practical partnership. Hard work in the fields, long hours under the sun, but it started to pay off. Their finances crept upward, a rare glimmer of relief, and soon Assunta gave birth to their fifth child, a moment of joy amid the grind. Yet, beneath this fragile progress, two vastly different lives were unfolding. Maria and her siblings knew poverty intimately, meager meals, patched clothes, but their home had a heartbeat of stability. Luigi and Assunta poured love and faith into their kids, creating a haven despite the odds. Alessandro's story, though, was a jagged mess. His mother had unraveled long before, her mind broken by struggles no one fully understood. In a chilling moment of despair, she'd tried to drown him in a well, only to pull back at the last second. Not long after, she ended her own life, leaving Alessandro haunted by that near-death memory and the weight of her absence. Then his brother died too, another blow to a boy already battered by loss. While Maria's childhood held warmth and structure, Alessandro's was a storm of neglect and pain, a stark divide growing wider every day. Then came the real blow. The land they worked wasn't just tough, it was a death trap. Pano's marshy edges buzzed with mosquitoes, and in rural Italy back then, that spelled malaria. The disease had plagued the region for centuries, thriving in the stagnant water. One blistering summer day, Luigi was out in the fields when he suddenly dropped, fever seizing his body. Assunta brought him home, tending to him with every ounce of strength she had. But malaria doesn't bargain. 10 days later, he slipped away at just 41 years old. The Goretti's world cracked open. Assunta a widow, Maria and her siblings fatherless. Their fragile hope buried with him. When Luigi died, the Goretti family was left reeling, and young Maria, just 9 years old, found herself thrust into a role far beyond her years. Assunta had no choice but to take over the back-breaking field work, leaving Maria to hold the home together. She rose before dawn, dressing her younger siblings in patched clothes, stirring thin porridge from whatever they had left, and gathering them for prayers that echoed the faith her parents had instilled. Each week, she'd set out alone for the market, a small figure trudging along with a basket of eggs and vegetables from their meager farm. She'd haggle for every coin, buying only the barest necessities: flour, maybe a bit of oil, her hands trembling from the cold or the weight of responsibility. Yet, no matter how tired she was, she'd pause at the shrine of Our Lady of Grace, kneeling in quiet prayer, her whispered words a lifeline to something bigger than her struggles. That faith wasn't just a habit. It was her strength, her shield. But danger was closing in. Alessandro Serenelli, now 20 and hardened by his own dark past, had begun fixating on Maria. It started subtly. Lewd jokes, lingering stares that made her skin crawl. She'd snap back, voice firm, or swing a broom to drive him off, but he wouldn't relent. Her defiance only seemed to egg him on. Then, on July 5th, 1902, it all exploded. Assunta and the older kids were out working the fields, leaving Maria home with baby Teresa. She sat on the sunlit second-story landing, mending a brother's torn shirt, glancing at Teresa napping nearby when Alessandro barged in. He snatched a knife from the kitchen, seized her arm, and yanked her inside, slamming the door shut. His intentions were unmistakable. He tried to force himself on her. Maria fought with everything she had, her small frame thrashing against his grip. "No, no! God forbids this! It's a sin!" she cried, her voice cutting through the air. Furious at her resistance, Alessandro snapped. He plunged the knife into her again and again, 14 vicious stabs until she collapsed, blood soaking the floor. Calmly, he walked to his room and lay down, leaving her to die. Teresa's wails brought the family running, and they found Maria barely alive. A frantic cart ride got her to the hospital, where she clung to life just long enough to forgive Alessandro. Her final words, a faint murmur of grace. On July 6, 1902, she slipped away at 11 years old. As Maria's life faded in that hospital bed, surrounded by nuns keeping vigil, she left behind something unforgettable. Her body was broken, 14 stab wounds tearing through her, but her spirit, unbreakable. With her mother weeping at her side, someone asked if she'd forgive Alessandro, the man who'd done this to her. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Yes, I forgive him. I want him to be with me in heaven one day." Imagine that. An 11-year-old, staring down death, choosing mercy over bitterness. On July 6, 1902, she took her last breath, but her words hung in the air. A quiet promise that would ripple far beyond that moment. Alessandro didn't escape the consequences. Hauled off in chains, he faced trial. His flimsy self-defense plea laughed out of court. Sentenced to 30 years, he started as a caged animal, angry, defiant, lashing out at guards and inmates alike. His temper landed him in solitary more times than anyone could count. But 6 years into his sentence, something cracked open inside him. He claimed Maria visited him in a dream, standing in a glowing garden, offering him 14 white lilies, one for each brutal stab. Her eyes, he said, held no hate, only forgiveness, and it hit him like a thunderbolt. From then on, Alessandro wasn't the same. He softened, started helping instead of hurting, earning nods from even the toughest prison staff. His transformation was so real, they let him out 3 years early. Once free, he didn't run from his guilt. He sought out Assunta, Maria's mother, dropping to his knees before her, voice shaking as he begged forgiveness for the nightmare he'd unleashed. Assunta, still carrying her own grief, paused, then said, "If my daughter forgave you, who am I to hold a grudge?" It was a moment of raw grace. Alessandro spent his remaining years quietly, working odd jobs, then joining a Capuchin monastery, where he prayed and served until his death at 87. In a letter found later, he called Maria his good angel, the one who'd pulled him from ruin. Maria's story didn't end with her death. It grew into something monumental. Her bravery and forgiveness struck a chord, spreading across Italy and beyond. On April 27, 1947, she was beatified at St. Peter's Basilica with Assunta, her mother, and Pope Pius XII looking on. 3 years later, on June 24, 1950, Maria was canonized, dubbed the Saint Maria, Agnes of the 20th century. That day, a staggering 500,000 people flooded St. Peter's Square. one of the largest crowds ever recorded there. Assunta stood among them, alongside 4 of Maria's surviving siblings, as the Pope urged young people to guard their purity with God's grace. Her relics now rest in the Basilica of Nostra Signora delle Grazie in Nettuno, 37 miles south of Rome, a quiet tribute to her loud legacy. Her brothers later shared wild stories. Angelo said Maria guided him to America in a dream, while Mariano swore her voice kept him alive in World War I, telling him to stay in his trench moments before disaster struck. Whether you buy those miracles or not, Maria's impact is undeniable. She became a symbol of resilience, faith, and the power of forgiveness, her name etched into history. Personally, I'm blown away by this girl. At 11, she faced horrors I can't fathom, yet chose love over hate in her final breath. That Alessandro turned his life around because of her? It's proof forgiveness can heal even the ugliest wounds. To me, Maria's story isn't just about tragedy. It's about hope, about how one small soul can light up the darkest corners. What do you think? Does her strength inspire you too? Drop your thoughts below. And that's the incredible story of Maria Goretti. A tale of tragedy, faith, and forgiveness that stuck with me long after I first heard it. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through early 20th century Italy. I hope you found it as moving as I did. If you've got thoughts to share, like what struck you most about Maria's courage or Alessandro's turnaround, I'd love to hear them. Drop a comment below and let's chat about it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into history's wildest stories. I've got plenty more lined up, and I'd hate for you to miss out. Maybe you've got a suggestion for a tale we should cover next. Let me know. For now, that's all from me. Thanks again for watching, you amazing people. Take care, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, for now.